All right, hello everybody. So in this video, I want to start to talk about why we do citations and how. So in general, when we're doing academic work, especially research type papers or persuasive essays, we want to make sure that we are citing things both to avoid plagiarism and make sure that our reader knows why and our sources are credible. And they'll know they are credible based on what the actual source is. So we're providing that information. So the first thing, right, of course, is that citations help us avoid plagiarism. And we have to remember that citations always appear in two places. I need an in-text citation and I need an entry in my works cited. I can't have just one. If I have an in-text citation but no source in my works cited, then my reader can't go and find that original source, and I tend to lose credibility. If I just have a source in my works cited, I haven't actually cited it, so I haven't necessarily referenced it. If I'm using ideas from a source, I need to make sure that I have a citation. So that could be for a direct quote, that could be for a paraphrase or whatnot. So that in-text citation tells a reader which source you used for your quote or your paraphrase or your summary. And that works cited also tells the reader where they can go to read the whole source. Okay, there are definitely times where I'm reading student papers and I'm interested by something, and I will go and look at the original source, often out of curiosity. There are a couple other reasons that I might go check that link, and I'll cover that in a later video. So the format for an in-text citation is the author's last name and the page number if we have one. If there's no author, you use just the first few words of the title. And if there's no page number, you do not need to include one. And I will cover this in more detail in this video and probably in the next as well. Okay, so what I have here is I sort of recreated this template from the actual MLA handbook. So I'm going to talk through this. Now, in another video, I'll show you some citation generators which will make these citations for you so you don't have to do it manually. But I want you to understand what the components are if you did, for example, need to make one manually or you wanted to check to make sure your citations were accurate. So in the left-hand column here, you see different things: author, source, container, contributors, etc. In the right-hand column here, I would simply fill in the information that I have. And if I don't have information, I'm just going to leave that blank. So for example, if I had a source that had no author, I leave that blank and I just go to the next available thing and all the way down, right? So for example, a lot of sources, if they're not academic, will not probably have a version, a number, or volume and things like that. And publication date may vary. It may have a publication date. It may not. If it's an online source, that publication date may be a day, month, and year. It may be a month and year. It may be a year, or it could even be a season in a year. So like spring 2025 or summer 2025. Location can also vary. If it's a printed version of something, that would be the page numbers. And if it's an online source, that would be the URL or the web address. Okay, so we'll kind of continue working with this, but I want to show you how this works. So if I go to the next slide, I want to talk just briefly about that idea of a container, because this is something that students do get confused by. There's a title of the source. So that the source title is the title of the article or the essay or something like that. The container is the book or the website that contains or holds that article or essay. So according to style.mla.org, quote, "The concept of containers is crucial to MLA style. When the source being documented forms part of a larger whole," so that source is in something bigger, "the larger whole can be thought of as a container that holds that source. For example, a short story may be contained in an anthology." That's a book of a lot of different stories. The short story is the source, and the title of the anthology is the container. Okay, so we'll kind of walk through this too in a couple examples. So this example is also from the MLA handbook. It's from the 8th edition. We're now on the 9th, but there's so much similarity that it's not worth really nitpicking. So they give us an example here of an article by Ann Goldman that appeared in the journal The Georgia Review in 2010. Back issues of the Georgia Review or older version or older issues of the Georgia Review are contained in JSTOR, which is an online database. Now, there's one thing missing from what they give us here, and that's the title of the source, right? They give us the author, the Georgia Review is the container, and then we get a secondary container, which is JSTOR. So I have my author, Goldman, comma, and again, always author's last name and then first name. And even in writing about sources, I always refer to authors by their last name. That's the MLA convention. The title of the source, so this is what they didn't give us on the left-hand side. So the title of the source is Questions of Transport, reading Primo Levi, reading Dante. Then the next thing I get is the container, which is the Georgia Review. So we think of the Georgia Review as like a magazine. One article in that magazine, that particular issue of that magazine, is this Questions of Transport, reading Primo Levi, reading Dante. In this case, I did have a volume and a number. Again, it's not going to be common, or not every source is going to have that. I have a publication date. Again, in this case, it's just a year, so I don't have a day or a month. The location, that PP stands for pages. So it's between page 69 and 88. What that tells a reader is if they wanted to go find this article, they could go to the Georgia Review, they could go to volume 64, number 1, and they could go through that magazine to page 69, and that's where this source should start. Now we have a secondary container here because we didn't find this article in the physical copy. We found it through an online database. So we found it in JSTOR. And then I also need a secondary location, which is the URL or the web address. Now you can use a location like this, or you can use what we call a DOI, which is a direct object identifier, just so long as we have that URL. If for any reason it's a source that you didn't find online, you wouldn't need that. But for any source that you find online, whether or not it exists in a physical copy somewhere else, you need to show where you found it. Okay. So when I put that all together, I get this. So I get the author's last name, right? Ann Goldman. Then I get the title of the source, and again, it's an article, so it's in quotation marks. Then I get my container, the Georgia Review, and anything that's longer is put in italics, and that's true anywhere in MLA. So if I'm referring to a whole book, the title of that book is in italics, so that's a sort of slanted font. And you can usually do that by highlighting text and clicking the little slanted I in the top tools bar of your word processor. The next thing I have is this hanging indent, and the hanging indent is something that a lot of students miss or have trouble with. If you think of a regular paragraph as the first line of each paragraph that you're typing is tabbed and it's indented, then the works cited entries are the opposite. Every line after the first line of that entry gets tabbed in, and that just makes it a lot easier for somebody to scan through your works cited and find a particular source. So creating citations, right? So we've got just a couple examples here. And what I want to show you is that just based on this screenshot, I have everything that I need in order to create a works cited entry. So I have the author's name. It's a little bit hard to see here sometimes, but Catherine Pollard. So it would be Pollard, comma, Catherine, because last name comes first. I have the title of the source, What Makes Us Human. I have the title of the container, The Scientific American, and I have the date here, May 20, 2009. Now, I don't have page numbers because it's a website, so I am good there. I also have my URL up here if I didn't mention that. So let's see what this would look like, right? So I've got author, title of source, title of container, again, container in italics. I didn't have a number or a volume, so I'm going to leave that blank. I have a publication date, May 2009. There are no page numbers, so I'm going to leave the location line blank. I have the title of, this should be the publisher rather than container again, Scientific American, and then the location, which should be the full URL. Now, when I put that together, it should look like this, right? So I have Catherine Pollard, What Makes Us Human. The container is italicized. In this case, it's a little bit strange because although Scientific American is a website and a newspaper, it's published by a company with the same name, which is why we see this Scientific American repeated. Then I have the date that it was published, the location, which is the full URL, and the date access. So that's the date that I found it. Now, although date accessed is technically optional in MLA, I would suggest that you always use it, mostly for yourself so that somebody else can see when you looked at it. And if that source changed, because online sources sometimes do change, slightly details change, errors are corrected, then somebody can see when you looked at it, okay? So I'm not going to make you do this, but let's just look at a couple more options or examples, right? So again, all the information I need is here. I have the author, James Gallagher, the title of the source, DNA surgery on embryos removes diseases. I have the title of the container, BBC News, and I have the location, which is the URL. So it would look like this, Gallagher, James. I have the title of the source. I have the container. And then again, in this case, BBC News is the container. The publisher is BBC, so it looks a little redundant. I have the date they published it. I have the full URL and then the date accessed. Now, I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but you might have noticed that these web addresses, the URL, is not hyperlinked. I couldn't just click on that and be taken to the source. That is a convention. We remove those hyperlinks. Usually you can do it by kind of hovering over a link, and then it should give you an option to remove the link. But I can help you with that if you have any questions, or you can visit the library. I'm going to skip over this next one. And let's just look at how this all comes together in a works cited as I kind of bring this particular video to an end. So first thing that I would encourage you to notice is that we have things alphabetized here. So if I have multiple sources, it's always alphabetized by the first letter of each entry. So G comes before S. So it doesn't matter what order I've quoted things in. It's just the convention so that it makes something very easy to find for your reader. The other thing is, again, we have that hanging indent here where every line after the first line of that entry is tabbed in. And you can see here how that makes it actually really easy to scan down that left-hand margin and find a source. Things that I'll talk about, or that we can talk about later this quarter, is citing things like charts, graphs, or images. Those things don't happen very often, so I don't regularly cover them in videos like this, just because it's a case-by-case type thing. So if you decide to use those things, you can ask me and we can cover that together. I'm going to skip that. Couple little notes, right? Remember, remove that hyperlink from URLs, use regular capitalization, include a date access for online sources that are not published physically. Remember to use that hanging indent and alphabetize your sources, your works cited by the first letter of each entry. Now, in another video, I will cover citation generators. You're more than welcome to use these. Again, I think as I mentioned at the outset of this video, I just want to make sure you know how to create these manually if you needed to, right? So you're welcome to use those citation generators. Just make sure that it's set to MLA format and not a different format, because there are a lot of different citation formats out there, and it has to be MLA for our class. Okay, there you go. If you have questions, comments, concerns, jokes, memes, or recipes, please let me know. Otherwise, I will talk to you all later.